Hello, dear listeners. Welcome back. Today we have another session with Michael on what does the Bible tell us about conspiracies. We are in session 20 on this 19th of March, 2022. Time's just flying along, Michael, and here we are. It's a sunny, beautiful day here in Minnesota, and I know it's getting late there in Germany, and if you did have the sun out, it's definitely gone down, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's about two, but from next weekend on, we got some called summertime or Middle European summertime, and therefore then we have to push the clocks 1 hour in advance, 1 hour further, and so that will mean that there will be 1 hour more sunlight when you have when you are coming home from work, which I find very attractive. Yeah. And also tomorrow, that is the official beginning of springtime. Officially, yes. Or let's say the start of the year, actually, but people do not see it that way, huh?
Isn't that interesting, the fact that the Julian calendar was around, I believe, before the time of Christ even. And here we are with the Gregorian calendar, which started right after the Reformation. Counter-Reformation, anyone? So, yeah, it continues, doesn't it? It will continue till, the last trump, so to speak, as the Bible says, when the dead in Christ shall rise, and we that remain will gather with him in the air. So, yeah, Michael, very interesting reading this book, The Seventh Vial, this morning. Again, I was getting back into that, and I know that you had mentioned that Jörg Lisbon was talking about the 1203 days for some time, and that is the next chapter in the Seventh Vial book, and I find it very intriguing. And also very difficult. And I've been stuck on that chapter for 6 months, a year?
Oh, really?
Yeah, I have. And I hope to get back into that, even if I have to do it by myself. So we'll see what happens. But, Michael, we're not here for the Seventh Vial. We're here for What does the Bible tell us about conspiracies, session 20, where we are going to go into much more to do with the assassination of John F. Kennedy, I believe, isn't it?
Yeah, spot on. And also you have to remember that it is, for me, it was a interesting thing to do, because to do that in German and English, many people in Germany are highly regarding JFK until this very day. And to see all the religious background, I think it's very much interesting also for American or English-speaking people, as well for German-speaking people. And it is a role model for the things of the ties between the church and state. And therefore I chose JFK. And I know that it's a very, very difficult task, which is at the moment occupying so much of my spare time. But I want to do that reasonable. And therefore I have come up with so many things, and I can promise that from next session on we were going into the real backgrounds of the assassination itself. So therefore this is the last session, so to speak, where it is not directly related to the background, although it is, because in this session I will raise some interesting question, which is, could the assassination of John F. Kennedy been avoided? Because we have learned from the last session, when we were speaking about his mother, Rose Kennedy, that to everything there is an hour. And there is also a chapter of the Bible which I proposed. No, sorry. There's a chapter in the Bible which I would suggest to read at the end of the session. To everything there is a season and a time, to every purpose under the heaven. And so were they possibilities to avoid the assassination of John F. Kennedy? Quite reasonable, and logically, of course, you have to say yes and nod your head. because there were many so-called premonitions. Allegedly, JFK, on the day he died, says, quote, "Suppose a man had a pistol in a briefcase, then he could drop the gun and the briefcase and melt away in the crowd," unquote. And that I found a few days ago, and that is very much the same assumption that I had when we were doing JFK and the open car, the Lincoln SS-100, a few sessions before, and I said there would be much more easier things to do than to shoot somebody with a rifle 200 feet away or so, but to have a clear shot on the president. But you see, that is just the beginning of all the mess. The Los Angeles Times on July the 24th, 1998 says, 2.5 years before his assassination, JFK seemed to have a premonition of his own death. A paper that Kennedy's longtime secretary, Evelyn Lincoln, tucked into her diary was included in 60,000 pages of documents made public in Washington by the National Archives Anti-Assassination Records Review Board, which accumulates documents that could shed light on the November 22nd assassination. Lincoln said she found the note on June 5th, 1961, in which Kennedy wrote, "I know there is a God and I see a storm coming. If he has a place for me, I am ready," unquote. The problem is that God is a tricky word, according to the Jesuit general Arturo Sosa. And
oh, I'm sorry, I have to laugh with this picture of George W. Bush.
Yeah, I said that God is a tricky word because there are billions of people who have a different understanding than us.
Oh, tell me about it, Michael.
What God really is or depicts. Yeah, so everybody serves a God or a great architect or what else, but you see, everybody serves a so-called supreme being. Yes, you can mention several orders and several cults and several religions, several countries. Ask Native Americans about God and they will tell you, I think, quite a different story. Yeah, asks Hindus about God and you will get a different story.
Ask George W. Bush. He'll get it straight up.
Yeah, we have covered that. I just found that picture so hilarious.
Oh, it is.
Yeah, because it resembles the quote of Arturo Sosa quite well. Yeah, God is a tricky word. And even the mentioning of God on a cover where you would like to make money with, like in the example of George W. Bush, is a violation of the third commandment.
Sure.
But I think that he does not care. So that was a quote that supposedly Evelyn Lincoln, as the secretary, found 2.5 years before the assassination. He knows that he would have many, many enemies, but it seems he didn't care. Because his follower, Lyndon B. Johnson, had a much more intimate relationship to the papacy, that even the papacy, they have visited him in the White House, a thing that John F. Kennedy had not allowed during his presidency. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And there's a book called In the Boat with LBJ. No doubt Jacobson was thankful that LBJ did not go on to recount their meeting with Pope Paul VI 2 months earlier. At the president's request, Jake genuflected and kissed the pontiff's ring.
Ah, that's genuflected, yeah. That's when you kneel on one knee and you have your other, knee up in the air, this traditional,
okay.
kind of like when you see these photos of men proposing to a woman on one knee and he has the ring in his hands, please marry me.
Mm-hmm.
That's an example of genuflecting, Michael.
Mm-hmm. Okay. That's a big, big difference between Lyndon B. Johnson, who was a good friend with Pope, it seems.
Mm-hmm.
And once again, when referring to Dallas Morning News on the day of the assassination, November 22nd, 1963. Mm-hmm. This is the next day, Saturday, as the day of Saturn, not Sabbath, of course, because this paper has been printed in an Antichrist country, bred in your country.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this has been Saturday and not 7th. November the 23rd, Kennedy slain on Dallas Street. Johnson becomes president. He's smiling, and John F. Kennedy has been killed.
Yeah, he's smiling all right.
He's smiling already, yeah. He smiled even during the inauguration. He smiled even during the sworn in.
The ceremony to swear him in, yeah.
Yeah, at the Air Force One, but he was automatically being president. You see that he would not have to be sworn in, according to my knowledge, because he automatically was in charge. So that was only a ceremony. Also, with the attendance of the former First Lady, and I was smiling all over again. Oh, there are so many things coming up. There's a book called The Role of J. Edgar Hoover in the Assassination of President Kennedy by Mark North. Act of Treason. Tuesday. I think this is American format here, so that means on the 4th of February, Tuesday. Johnson finally panics over the growing Baker scandal. You remember that a few sessions ago, 2 sessions ago, we spoke about the Bobby Baker scandal, which culminated, of course, with the assassination of Kennedy, so that Johnson got rid of many of his problems, because otherwise he would not have become president. That was clear from the beginning if you compare this newspaper on the day of the assassination, which says Nixon says JFK may drop Johnson in 1964. So thousands of people in Dallas on the day of the assassination knew that there was big trouble between Kennedy and Johnson. And here, Mr. Nixon, who, what a coincidence, was becoming also president in the future, he was kind of a whistleblower, or was he? I think these things were done on purpose. Yeah. There is no coincidence that many of the United States presidents were present at the day and the time of the assassination. Officially, Nixon went on plane and was not in Dallas at the time of the assassination. But, of course, Lyndon B. Johnson was. Of course. And Herbert Walker Bush also was present at the assassination. So many of United States presidents were present there. It's like a test area, huh? Going back to the book Act of Treason. Tuesday, 4th of February, Johnson finally panics over the growing Baker scandal. On February the 4th, 1964, Washington lobbyist Winter Berger was discussing public relations with Speaker of the House McCormick in McCormick's Washington office. Johnson then barged in and began ranting hysterically, oblivious to the lobbyist's presence. Johnson says, "John, that son of a bitch, Bobby Baker, is going to ruin me. If that peep talks, I'm gonna land in jail. I practically raised that peep, and now he's gonna make me the first president of the United States to spend the last days of his life behind bars," unquote. If that is correct, that would tell you the weight of the Bobby Baker scandal. It's a very interesting find, but nevertheless, I cannot prove it, but I just wanted to share that. I have found an article in a German newspaper who says that the FBI director, J. Edgar Hoover, was since 1934 boss, chef, head director of the FBI. So he was in charge for almost 30 years when the assassination of Kennedy took place. And now it is really interesting. Lyndon B. Johnson has become president of the United States, and he declared Hoover at his the most important living American. J. Edgar Hoover was living together with his mother for the reason that he was a homosexual until she dies, and then he was 43 years old. Then he had a deputy, Clyde A. Tolson. And together with him, he went into this office, and they were having dinner, and etc., etc., etc. And you can guess what he was besides being a deputy, okay? But there is another thing which came into the things which I like to handle here in the Kennedy. It's been said that Kennedy was not faithful, and he had the same mistress as Frank Sinatra, and Sinatra, of course, had also ties with the mafia, with the mob, and the mob has, of course, ties with the Vatican. Yeah, and so he had the same mistress with Judith Campbell Exner as together with Sam Giancana and also Frank Sinatra. So this is Miss Judith Exner, and she says that she lied to the church committee in the 1970s in her memoir out of fear of mafia retaliation. She said Kennedy had asked her to contact Giancana, and she helped set up a meeting between them during the 1960s presidential election. So many people around these people. Many people were playing part. Yeah, and Robert Kennedy also was having big time trouble with J. Edgar Hoover, of course. Yeah. Oh, now it gets really interesting. How got the information to Hoover? Through the usual illegal sources, but for a system called ELSUR, which means electronic surveillance. It did not deliver any pictures, but voices. Of the existence of these systems was not been known to the Kennedy brothers. So that is really interesting, because that if the head of the FBI is collecting information, then it is the same thing that we have discovered from Lyndon B. Johnson when he has written everything down for his so-called memoirs, but it was, of course, to blackmail people. And now we got the information of a German newspaper that J. Edgar Hoover himself used a system called electronic surveillance. So that means that the FBI knew much more than what was stated in any reports, because they had the oral confirmation of any records of, for example, telephone calls and such as. I found that very interesting find. But that's not the issue, of course, of the assassination and of the premonition, of the foreknowledge. Of course, you see that the Secret Service could not or should not protect the president. They had to stand down on that day. And so that is the first hint, of course. That is at the Love Field Airport in Dallas, where his two accompanying bodyguards had been called back, calling away the president's two most important bodyguards, of course. Yeah. And Mr. Emily Roberts was the man in charge of the agents, and it is no secret that all the agents had a drinking affair the night before in Fort Worth. So many of them were under the influence, of spirits, evil spirits. Yeah, I'm not making any fun of it. I'm not making any fun of it. If you are a drunk and you have a certain amount of alcohol in your blood, then you cannot properly function, and that's because that you are being under the influence. I know that in America, of course, you have you will be filed if you have a DUI, driving under influence. And now imagine you're being one of the Secret Service protection guards for the President of the United States, and you're being driven under influence. I don't know how much influence they got, but they got a drinking accident, so to speak, happened until very much after midnight. So I don't know how much reliable these people had been. But I don't think that this drinking accident was an accident on the night before. Yeah, that's my assumption. Because there are many so-called not so much coincidences with Kennedy and Lincoln. They both were shot on a Friday. and Lincoln was shot in the Ford Theater, and Kennedy was shot in a Lincoln made by Ford. And then afterwards, the assassin, so alleged assassin, he was then, fleeing to a theater. How convenient. Yeah, Oswald was killed before being brought to trial, and Mr. John Wilkes Booth was killed before being brought to trial, etc. It's the same method all over again. It's the same all over again. It's just a repetition. Because they were spreading hate against the president, wanted for treason and all the things. They were making big advertisements against Kennedy on the day of the assassination. Yeah, that is coming here from the Dallas Morning News. That's the newspaper which I was presenting you at the beginning of the session. Welcome, Mr. Kennedy. It is supposed to say that the so-called American Fact-Finding Committee was proposing that John F. Kennedy was the cause for all the mess in America. This was on the day of JFK execution, when the Dallas Morning News published this full-page advertisement. 10 years later, 1973, a gangster called Morales loses his cool while drinking with friends and starts making damning comments like, quote, unquote, I was in Dallas when we got the son of a bitch, and I was in Los Angeles when we got the little bastard. You know what Los Angeles means? It means Robert Kennedy, the younger brother, of course. Yeah. And so that is a problem here when the Secret Service had a stand down and the Secret Service was not in full force and should not been, even if they were just had a drinking accident. And it gets even worse because we know that there were also ties with LSD. And this is coming from a German script. Meet Timothy Leary, and this was the handler of Mrs. Judy Campbell Exner, which I said that she had ties to Frank Sinatra and the organized crime. And she was admitting that they had also used LSD on that regard to the president. So that is not a big thing, but Timothy Leary is not the average guy. And these guys are now, or were, in official was being used officially. So these were not the loonies behind the scene, but he was a university professor, actually. Yeah, so he was Bachelor of Arts, Master of Science, Doctor of Philosophy, University of California and Berkeley, etc., etc. And he has made experience, he and his children. Yeah, and his daughter Suzanne, they had found marijuana, and then he was sentenced to 30 years of jail. And then the judgment was being overturned. But then he was being confounded in June 1917 for two other things. In his car were found 2 joints, and he was being sentenced to 10 years of jail. But then, with the help of the so-called weatherman, he escaped in the 1970s from California, and he went to Algeria, that is in Africa. And then he went and he flew to Switzerland. Interesting, huh? Switzerland would not follow the United States law, and therefore he could there live without being harassed by the United States government. Huh? And
he'd fit in with all the rest of the folk in Switzerland too, wouldn't he?
Mm-hmm.
For the most part.
Yeah. Yeah. And then he said, okay, it's time for a reprogramming of the mind. And he was the inventor of the slogan, turn on, tune in, drop out. Yeah. And he had another approach as Mr. Aldous Huxley, brave new word, who was, of course, the brother of the UNESCO director Julian Huxley, who experimented in 1953 with mescaline.
Oh,
and he has,
Michael.
Yeah.
My memory is alerted to an experience that I had. I was in Switzerland, I believe, in 1989. Now, isn't it true that they have a watch in Switzerland called the Swatch?
Yes, absolutely
and
correct.
They had some kind of store there. My brother and I were there, and I bought a Swatch there. And when I was around that same day, someone approached me on the street and was speaking in French, and I'm not French. I'm from the United States. And he says, "Oh, would you happen to know where I can get some, what was it he was looking for? Some illegal drug. What was it? Heroin." I says, "What?" That was rather surprising, but now that I know more about Switzerland, I guess it isn't that surprising. It's just nothing against Switzerland. It's just that, there's all kinds of suspicious behavior going on, apparently.
Oh, Switzerland is one of the most wealthiest countries because it has been protected by the papacy. And Switzerland does provide the bodyguards to the papacy, and I can assure you they will follow their orders and they will not have a drunken accident like the bodyguards of President Kennedy, I think.
Well, I guess this young man thought that I looked like I was, potentially a drug user, I guess. Huh? But, yeah. But
I don't know how you look like 30 years ago. I don't know.
Yeah. But anyway, Michael, yeah. I thought that was interesting.
Of course.
No one had ever approached me in my entire life and asked me if I knew where I could get some heroin.
I was approached when I was at the age of 25 or so. I was approached in the Netherlands and from a motorbike rider, which are quite frequently used in the big cities of Netherlands. Then watch out for tourists or so, and then they ask if you want to have a joint or so.
Oh yeah, sure, gotcha.
Yeah, that was happening once, but I said no, sorry, I don't use any drugs.
Right. Gotcha.
You have to be very careful not to be rude to these guys, but these guys are organized, so these guys will not act alone.
Right.
Yeah. But you can smell or tell that these guys will have any backup somewhere around the next corner or so. So I don't recommend anybody to get in an argument with these guys. You see that this is organized crime, almost. Yeah, so Aldous Huxley also was experimental with drugs, so it was mescaline, and maybe the most important fact is not being the brother of Julian Huxley, but that he has been stated all his experiences in his text called Die Pforten der Wahrnehmung. Everybody who's not into the Aldous Huxley, the gates. No. It's the doors of perception. It must be in English. Yeah, the doors of perception. Yeah. And that book, he was depicting his experiences with mescaline, and that also went on to become the name of the band, The Doors.
I was going to say, Michael.
Yeah, and from the band The Doors.
That sounds very, very influential to this young man who was actually, I believe, the son of some military guy.
Yeah, there was the military commander who commanded that boat, who was then officially been attacked and started the Vietnam War. And so then you got also another tie to Kennedy, huh?
Oh, wow.
Vietnam War, yeah. The Doors of Perception, written by Aldous Huxley, psychedelic experiments under the influence of mescaline.
Oh, boy.
But going into Aldous Huxley, look when he died.
Really?
Yeah, sure. Not only he, but also C.S. Lewis died also on the very same day as the JFK.
What?
And yes. Yeah.
Are you serious? That's really strange.
I can only state Wikipedia on that regard. On his deathbed, unable to speak owing to advanced laryngeal cancer, Huxley made a written request to his wife Laura for LSD 100 microgram intramuscular. According to her accounts of his death, the timeless moment, she obliged with an injection at 11:20 a.m. and the second dose an hour later. Huxley died aged 69 at 5:20 p.m. on the 22nd of October 1963. Media coverage of Huxley's death, along with that of fellow British author C.S. Lewis, was overshadowed by the assassination of American President John F. Kennedy on the same day, less than 7 hours before Huxley's death. The championship trophy for badly timed death, though, goes to a pair of British writers. Aldous Huxley, the author of Brave New World, died the same day as C.S. Lewis, who wrote the Chronicles of Narnia series. Unfortunately for both of their legacies, that day was November the 22nd, 1963, just as John Kennedy's motorcade passed the Texas School Book Depository. Huxley at least made it interesting. At this request, his wife shot him up with LSD a couple of hours before the end, and he tripped his way out of this world. Let's get back to the script.
Oh, geez.
Yeah. Yeah, you see that these people are the two commandments of the molecular age. You shall not change the conscience of your neighbor, and you shall not hinder your next to change her conscience. Yeah, these are gods, semi-gods. Semi-gods. He wanted to solve the problem of the Übervölkerung, of too many people, life extensions. All these people are gods. Yeah. He says, oh yeah, we will get rid of death. Yeah. Through cryonic and biotechnology. Yes, it's all these so-called intelligence people. Let's get rid of that. Yeah, this is a concept also from Robert Anton Wilson, the disinformation agent. Illuminati, his most famous novel. Yeah. Prometheus Rising, yes. This is Timothy Leary, by the way, with John Lennon and Yoko Ono, and you can guess why they have spent so many time in bed, and you can guess why they have both been pictured naked. You can guess what they were up to when this guy here is in front and maybe in charge. Now, maybe John and Yoko only also was an experiment of Mr. Timothy Leary. Give peace a chance, because when Give Peace a Chance, in the very lyrics here, it's been called of Timothy Leary. Yeah, Answer for Timothy Leary, dearie. In Let the Sunshine In. Yeah, and the musical Hair also been depicted. And I know that it was also in Give Peace a Chance. My, I know it was in Give Peace a Chance. I'm 100% Give Peace a Chance lyrics. I know it is in that. Give Peace a Chance lyrics. Come on, let's show it to me. I refuse anything. Yeah, there it is. Everybody's talking about John and Yoko, Timmy Leary, Rosemary, and so on. You see, Bobby Dylan, Timmy Leary. That is Timothy Leary, of course. Yeah. Yeah, so he was a very high profile LSD dealer. Oh, no, he was a professor and a Bachelor of Arts, Master of Science, and all these things. And these people nowadays are much more influential than in 1960, 70, because now these so-called doctors and so, you see that these are all Luciferians, and that's a real problem for real Christians in the future, I guess. Yeah. So in the musical Hair also it's been depicted that life is very short, and of course this is all humanism, and this is all egoism, this is all Satanism. Yeah. And also there was a Berlin band called Ashra Temple, who sound a little bit like Tangerine Dream, by the way. And they had an album called 7 Up with Timothy Leary. And it's been recorded to the Lemonade 7 Up, which was then been treated with LSD during the time of the recording by their own manager, Rolf Ulrich Kaiser. I'm not making it up. This is really very prominently here in the European countries that we know that that was an album called 7 Up because they were drinking and LSD at the time when they were recording. Yeah? And also he was together with Billy Idol, of course, Rebel Yell. Rebel Yell is a song for Satan, yeah, because Satan is a rebel yell. Last night a little angel came bumping across my floor. Yeah? And if it expires, pray help from above. Yeah? In the midnight hour, she cried more, more, more. What do you think? It's midnight hour. What do you think? It's pray. What do you think? It's a little angel. Yeah. Who do you think is the rebel? Yeah. It's if you think the same as I think, then yeah, I'd sell my soul for you, Babylon. Yeah, so baby for me is the abbreviation of Babylon, by the way. This is always so because nobody can tell me the real meaning of baby. Huh? I'd sell my soul for you, babe. Yeah, in Germany it's baby. It's babe. Babe is then translated into baby, and baby I think is a very general term in English as well. So that is my hint to that. Yeah, if you go down every path, yeah, you come to the same people who want to control your mind by smiling and oh yeah, we only want your soul. Yes. You see, that is all the same. And he's also, I mentioned him in the last part. I did a 700 pages script for Bruce Lee, and I have no time to go into this, but he was also an unfaithful husband, and that was very usual for that day in the end of the 60s. That's not only JFK. Yeah, he was shouting and said that God is nothing else than sex. Yes. These people. My wife is God. Take me home. Yeah, these people are so. It is, at least it is funny, but they take him serious, yeah, because he's mentioning all the things while being drugged. Yeah. What do you think that resembles that background picture here? What do you think that is the real meaning of that picture? And I think that you are spot on. Yeah.
Total blasphemy.
Absolutely, Brett. And that means that when you are high, yeah, that means that I like to be like the Most High. That's the same as Isaiah 14, of course. Being high, being in a state of divine, or yeah, of course it's blasphemy.
It can also be called the strong delusion too, Michael.
Yeah. Yeah. Nixon called him the most dangerous man in America. Oh, yeah.
Really?
Yeah, supposedly, I don't know. Yeah, but you see that these people are coming from Harvard. These people are scientists and doctors, professors. Huh?
Nixon was just saying that for public consumption.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, A-OK. That also means 666.
Correct.
Yeah,
Spirit
and this is
of
him.
Antichrist.
Yeah, this is him during the recording. Or the mastering, actually. And this is the very album with the downside pyramid or triangle, which also stands for death, by the way. Timothy Leary and Ashwa Temple 7 Up. Yeah. 7 Up, that's the very album. And if you really want to know what playing under the influence is about, then I would highly recommend that album. You will be astonished to what kind of noises humans are able to produce under drugs. It is very astounding. It is hilariously funny. But at the same time, it's hilariously scary, because if you really then get the grasp that these people were under the influence of evil spirits, that is another thing to consider there. Please, if you listen to that, please listen to that with a certain distance.
Tell me, Michael, what year was this produced?
What's been stated here then? That is nothing stated. I know that was in the beginning of the 1970s somewhere.
Okay.
Ashba Temple 7 Up. I think it was 72. 73 it was.
Okay, 73.
73.
Fair
yes.
enough. Thank you, Michael.
Yeah, 73.
Got it.
Yeah. Hmm. 7 Up comes from Leary's 8-circuit theory of human consciousness. Yeah. Out of body part of human experience. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah. Okay, so then let's get it on. Timothy Leary, the 1960s Harvard professor who became the high priest of LSD. Oh, it's such a religious content here. Oh, by the way, this is a memo here of November 29th of a certain, what is the man called? George Bush's work as a CIA handler of anti-Castro Cuban revolutionaries in the Miami refugee community. Oh, there's so much going on with the family Bush. It's not even funny. George Bush Center for Intelligence here.
Oh, jeez.
Oh. Yeah. This is in your country, Mr. Brett.
Huh? Oh, of course. Yeah. Really nice, isn't it? Just great. Yeah. Well, you know, what do you expect from a president that was happy about the death of Senator Paul Wellstone and his entire family? What can you expect?
Nothing.
Yeah.
Only the words.
Yeah, there we go. That's pretty real.
Because nothing really worked, or nothing worked in the way of in the favor of Mr. Kennedy. Everything works against him. Yeah, there was no protection by the police. There was no protection by the Secret Service. There was no protection by the FBI, nor the CIA, nor anyone else. Nobody. Yeah, they were even moving the corpse to a different casket, moving the corpse from Parkland Hospital to a military base. You see that it's all been constructed and instructed and planned long before. Yeah, and his brother Bobby resigns 1 year after the assassination, days before the Warren Commission present its lies. Yeah, that's absolutely spot on. And of course, people who were in that thing, like Richard Nixon and so, of course, they will also been pushed in the spotlight. But what I really want to go into will come very soon. And this is a grab of the only man smiling at John F. Kennedy's younger brother's funeral. And there's, of course, an astonishing link between the JFK assassination and the deposing of Nixon. Speaking of Watergate, yes, because they are the same persons involved in that. Of course. Of course. Yeah, but if I would go down that path with the Watergate, we will never finish. So I'm not going into this. No, this is too soon to go into this. Remember that the Kennedy family was a very devout Roman Catholic family, of course. You see here Joe Kennedy, you see his wife, you see the young John F. Kennedy, you see supposedly Robert Kennedy here. Yeah, and you see Ted Kennedy as a child. And you see here the papal bodyguards from Switzerland. Yes, LSD country. Sorry, Timothy Leary country in 1938. 1938. Yeah. And so every time I come up with the scripts, I do something for the German thing, because in German there was a terrorist commando called the Red Army Fraction or Session. That was also a very interesting thing, but I have to skip that for the American and English-speaking audience. Or not, because they were using in an assassination of a German bank manager called Alfred Herrhausen, who was being killed in his car as well, with the help of a bomb. Alfred
did I see 22nd of November there?
Yeah, spoil it.
Again.
Yeah, you see here Alfred Herrhausen, who had been bombed in his own car, and the driver survived, but he not. Can you tell me how precise a bomb must be when the man in the rear seat has a fatal wound and the driver has not. It's very strange accidents. And also there, the bodyguards were not present at the time. And the assisting car also was too much in front or behind. I cannot recall at the moment. So he was supposed to die. There are many strange. He was one of the best advisors and the most important advisors to the German chancellor. So that would be equivalent, would be one of the best advisors to the American president if it would be connected to American policy. So let's get back to the script. And it's very strange because 8 days before the assassination on the German bank manager Alfred Herrhausen took place on the 13th of November 1989, on the Wednesday, the 22nd of November 1989, the 17 days in charge Lebanese president René Mouawad was been assassinated with a bomb. On the 22nd of November. Very interesting date, huh? Yeah. So question is, could this assassination been avoided so that Kennedy returned from Dallas? And I highly doubt that, because there were too many people involved in the assassination. You cannot tell me that this is coming or happening by accident. So first of all, it is Emory Roberts of the Secret Service, who then ordered the agents to stand down. So before the assassination took place, when they landed on I think it was about 50 minutes ago, before the assassination on 11:40, so to speak, they were moving into the presidential limousine heading towards Dallas. So that he was without any protection. But during the motorcade, they had at least one so-called protection. That is the very famous bodyguard, Mr. Clint Hill, who was at the special request of Jackie Kennedy, then protecting at least Jackie Kennedy, so that he was on the rear fender here of the limousine, and he was then guarding Mrs. Kennedy, so to speak. But when the presidential limousine attended then Main, Houston, and Elm Street, he was not seen. So very interesting. So there are many, many scripts about the strange actions or inactions of Agent Emory Roberts. Now, Mr. Roberts served as the commander of the agents in the follow-up year, one of two well-used 1956 Cadillac convertibles, so the car behind the presidential limousine. And and this car has also been used in the island trip as a presidential car in 1963. Yeah. The president visited Palm Beach, Miami, and Tampa on November the 18th, 1963. This is 4 days before the assassination. However, only the beautiful city of Tampa involved a motorcade, and quite an eventful one as Agent Chuck Sporrell and Don Lawton were riding on the rear of the limousine. Someone from the crowd threw a red powerhouse candy bar at the motorcade, and the confection landed with a thud on the hood of the Secret Service follow-up car. Thinking it could be a lethal stick of dynamite, Agent Robert pushed the object forcefully off the hood. Realizing what the object was, Roberts and the other agents shared a laugh about it. But they had good reason to be jumpy. The atmosphere in Tampa was one that gave the agents cause for concern. Hostility from the anti-Castro community. This is 4 days before the assassination. 4 days. Often, two agents of the rear of JFK's limousine took their own initiative in going between the two cars, as Agent Khalil did several times in Dallas. That's what I just showed you. So you cannot say that there was no protection. There was just one agent, and one agent is not sufficient enough. When you've been hit from the side or from or anywhere else, one agent is just not sufficient, of course. Yeah. This will become more important later. Jumping ahead to Dallas on November the 22nd, after friendly, enthusiastic, and uneventful motorcades in San Antonio, Houston, and Fort Worth, Agent Roberts assigned the other 7 agents on his particular shift to the follow-up car: Sam Kinney, Clint Hill, Paul Landis, William McIntyre, Glenn Bennett, George Hickey, and John Reddy. 4 of whom had only hours before participated in the infamous drinking incident in Fort Worth. Mr. Roberts' shift was the worst offender of the 3 shifts. What makes this tragic is that Roberts had the most important shift of all, the 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. shift, the Fort Worth, Dallas part of the Texas trip, etc., etc. They were all waiting for JFK to complete the motorcade. Agent Robert covered up the drinking incident despite Secret Service regulations which stated that this was grounds for removal from agency. Sleep deprivation and alcohol consumption wreak havoc on even the best trained reflexes. While leaving Love Field on the way to the heart of Dallas destiny and murder, Agent Roberts rose from his seat and, using his voice and several hand gestures, fought Agent Henry J. Ripka fall back from the rear area of JFK's limousine, caused the perplexed Ripka to stop and raise his arms several times and discussed. Ripka would then remain at the airport during the murder, having been effectively neutralized, although Paul Landis made room for him on the right running board on the follow-up car. Agent Ripka did not budge. Agent Ripka worked the follow-up in Houston the day before the 18 and was gun-carrying protective agent. He was not allowed to do his job on November the 22nd. Ripka has since died. Both Emery Roberts and Winston Lawson placed Agent Ripka in the follow-up car in their initial reports, only to correct the records later after the assassination, although Ripka was not even mentioned anywhere in Agent Lawson's preliminary survey report, making it seem obvious that he was covering Emery Roberts behind. As the cars approached the main Houston intersection, Clint Hill fell back to the follow-up car. This is extremely important here. So if you think that is a coincidence. Agent Hill was the only agent to ride on the rear of the limousine in Dallas, and he was not even assigned to JFK. As a last-minute addition to the trip, Agent Hill was, like Paul Landis, part of Jackie's detail and came as the First Lady's personal request. So you can see that from the Secret Service there was no protection. The April reports from agents Ben, Boring, Reddy Hill, and Emery Roberts allegedly after the fact that President Kennedy had ordered agents off the rear of the limousine of November the 18th in Tampa and in other cities. It has to be stated again, and with some corroboration to boot, JFK never ordered the agents to do anything, let alone telling the man to get off the rear of the limousine or to take off the bubble top, reduce the number of motorcycles, etc. Agents Ben and Boring totally refuted their own alleged reports in conversations with me, while agents Kinney, Youngblood, Book, Norris, Bolden, Lilly, Martineau, plus 2 recent interviews, agents Don Lawton and Art Godfrey confirmed the fact that JFK never ordered the agents to do anything. He was very cooperative, they told me. If you concentrate on the critical time frame in which these so-called presidential orders allegedly occurred, you can see what peril they caused in Dallas. No protection as requested on JFK's side of the car allegedly, no bubble top, partial or full, nor the usual number of motorcycles riding next to JFK, something that occurred everywhere except Dallas. Something that occurred everywhere except Dallas. And you really think that is a coincidence? And that this goes on and on and on and on. So if researchers really do research, you see all these misses and coincidences. Although Agent Roberts admitted recognizing Oswald's first shot as a rifle blast, as the Alkins photo confirms, he made a mysterious transmission via radio microphone that is not accounted for in his reports or in the official record. Instead of offering a shout or alarm alert or orders to his agents to do something that their own initiative lacked for some reason, in example, protective action, he did nothing to help the wounded president. The alleged speed of the limousine and the alleged distance between the 2 cars, 9 to 11 miles per hour and 5 feet in reality, not the 20 to 25 miles per hour and 20 to 25 feet, stated in both Special Agents Roberts and Agents Reddy's reports, was used as a pretext for the recall of Reddy. And this goes on and on and on and on and on. Roberts, one of the President Kennedy's agents, has decided to switch to Johnson as soon as Kennedy was shot. You cannot make it up. Yeah, of course. Later on we will discover that the presidential limousine has almost gotten to a complete stop. Yeah, because you see the brake lights not on the Zapruder film, but on the Orwell Nix film. Yeah. Oh, this is so much things to go into. So then in 1973, the researcher is here, Vince Palamara, and he says he died in late 70s, Mr. Emery Roberts, which is not true. I don't know why he has made that false statement, but that does not takes anything away from his usual research. So in 1973, the official in the Secret Service, Emery Roberts, died. Yeah. So 11:40, presidential plane arrived Love Field, 5 minutes late according to schedule. So this was Emery Roberts, who was on the front seat operating radio, and he was the agent in charge. That was agent AIC is agent in charge. So he was ordering all the other special agents. Also the friend of the president, Mr. David Powers, presidential aide, white jump seat, and Kenneth O'Donnell, which allegedly said to remove the bubble top. I found that in a few days ago. Yeah. And so this is crucial for the not protection of the presidential limousine. Yeah. Let's get it on. Yeah, you see, the only reaction against to Leach shots is in the car behind Lyndon B. Johnson. Yeah, but this is the fourth car, the third car, the second car with Emery Roberts, and then the presidential limousine. So very interesting, very interesting. And people says that Dallas was just a matter of cleaning it up. Yeah, so to get rid of all the evidence lying around, and so that people were smiling. Yeah, and the sworn in, you see that this is the new first lady, this is the old first lady. The president shot dead. And at the funeral of JFK, you even see here the French general or president of state, Charles de Gaulle. Devout Roman Catholic, of course. There were many premonitions or foreknowledge to that incident. On the 17th of November, you see here telex. Threat to assassinate President Kennedy in Dallas, Texas, November 22-23, 1963. Miscellaneous information concerning. You see, all the things can be faked, of course. If you assume CIA, FBI involved in that assassination, you have also to consider that they can fake every document. Info has been received by the Bureau, I think it is the Bureau of Investigation, FBI, determined that the militant revolutionary group may attempt to assassinate President Kennedy on his proposed trip to Dallas, Texas, November the 22-23, 1963. All receiving office should immediately contact all CIS. Logical, racial, and hate group informants and determine if any basis for threat, etc., 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 etc. So this is just the first hint. Speaking about anti-Castro controlled opposition. This is here the remark from J. Edgar Hoover, 29th of November, 7 days after the assassination. The substance of the following information was, orally furnished by Mr. George Bush of the Central Intelligence Agency. And later on this circuit, Mr. George Bush became the head of the Central Intelligence Agency. Yeah, and of course he was involved also in that assassination. 13 people who had foreknowledge of JFK's assassination from Patterson.medium. etc., etc. Let's get it on. JFK in Hawaii, June the 9th, 1963. You see any protection? No. You see, it would be far more easy to, in that close range, to drop a grenade or what else in the presidential car, or to shoot him from that distance. You see that it must be Hawaii because of this hilarious flower arrangement around his neck, of course. Yeah. Yeah. Numerous people had foreknowledge of the assassination. Interesting, but the Secret Service has not reacted. First, Melba Marcades Rose Jerami, the woman who knew too much. That's the woman who knew too much. Just a Smoking Gun. She earned a scene in Oliver Stone's 1991 film JFK. We will go into that movie as well in the, I think in 2 or 3 sessions. Oliver Stone. She was a drug runner for Jack Ruby and a dancer at the Carousel Club, Ruby's Dallas nightclub, who is, of course, the official assassinator or the official killer of the alleged killer of JFK, Mr. Lee Harvey Oswald. She was traveling in the car from Miami to Dallas with 2 men when an argument between them ensued as they drove through Eunice, Louisiana. This argument resulted in Rose being thrown from the car, if you would like to believe that, where she sustained injuries requiring hospitalization. Yeah. When Louisiana State Police Lieutenant Francis Fruch spoke with Rose regarding the incident, she told him that prior to being thrown from the car, the 2 men she was traveling with discussed a plot to kill JFK in Dallas. Admittedly, Lieutenant Fruch blew off the woman's claims. Yeah. Yeah, but that's not all Rose talked about during her hospital stay. She told everyone how she knew both Jack Ruby and Lee Harvey Oswald, and that she had witnessed Ruby and Oswald together at the Carousel Club on more than one occasion. So they knew each other. 2 days after Rose arrived at the hospital, John F. Kennedy, the 35th President of the United States of America, was assassinated in Dallas, just as Rose said. Of course, after the assassination, Rose was no longer considered crazy. News about Rose's foreknowledge of JFK assassination spread throughout the hospital, and everyone she talked about immediately became vital witness in the investigation of the murder of JFK. However, but not surprisingly, neither the Dallas Police Department nor the FBI showed any interest in this information, and neither did the Warren Commission. On September the 4th, 1965, Rose's body was found lying in a remote area just east of Big Sandy, Texas. Although some hospital reports claim she was alive for up to 8 hours before expiring at the hospital, her death certificate claims she was dead on arrival. The official explanation for Rose Jerami's death was that she had been run over by a motor vehicle. This is just a quotation of an article. I cannot go into the research of any nitty-gritty, just to say that there are many articles about foreknowledge. One injury of a note was a deep punctuate stellate wound above her right forehead, the type of injury sustained from a direct contact gunshot. Second one, Joseph Miltier. The plot to kill JFK was captured on a secret Miami police recording 2 weeks before the assassination. Let me tell you that he is deeply involved into the intelligence community, as I have researched. So he was supposed to be a JFK hater, and in a conversation here with the police informant William Somerset in a Miami apartment, Miltier Kennedy spoke of JFK's upcoming assassination. This Mr. Somerset said he will have 1,000 bodyguards, don't worry about that. And Mr. Miltier says the more bodyguards he has, the easier it is to get him. What do you figure out would be the best way to get rid of him or to get him? And Miltier says from an office building with a high-powered rifle. And Somerset remarked that he thinks that Miltier thinks that JFK is a marked man. And Miltier says it is in the working to kill Kennedy. So that is his quote. Maybe people also want to have their 5-minute fame. I don't know. Yeah. But otherwise, after the assassination took place, he even revealed the plan for a patsy when he said, hell, they pick up somebody within hours after if anything like that would happen just to throw the public off. Yeah, that's the same with 9/11, with Osama bin Laden. No date of the assassination was discussed, and the date took place in November the 18th, 4 days before the assassination. And his warnings were ignored by Secret Service personnel. Remember, he spoke to a police informant. Yeah, no measures were taken. Yeah, and supposedly Mr. Miltier was present on the day in Dallas. Man to believe Joseph Miltier. With JFK in foreground. Yeah. Close up. The day after the assassination, Joseph Miltier and William Somerset met again, this time in Jacksonville, Florida. Well, I told you so. It happened like I told you, didn't it? It happened from a window with a high-powered rifle. That was the way it was supposed to be done, and that was the way it was done. Yeah? Oh, there's so much things going on. There's so much things going on. A California phone call. Somebody says the president is going to die at 10:10. Yeah. But you see that it was Pacific time, and the assassination took place in Dallas, where it was Central time, or Central Standard Time, if I remember correctly. So that was 20 minutes before the assassination took place, or 15 minutes before Kennedy was shot. On Oxnard, California, telephone supervisor overheard a woman called, whispered to someone, the president is going to be killed. The strange call was intercepted by supervisors of the General Telephone Company in Oxnard. Huh? Yeah. There are many things happening here when you think that. This is, I think, far the most interesting thing. This is a man called Eugene Dinking, the man who intercepted the JFK plot. U.S. Army Ordnance cryptographic code operator, private first class Eugene Dinking was stationed in Metz, France, when he intercepted and decoded not one but two messages regarding the coming assassination of President Kennedy. The first message he intercepted was in October of 1963. The second was on November the 2nd, 1963, less than 3 weeks before the assassination. No one believed Dinking's warnings, and when he discovered the army was going to conveniently require him to undergo psychological evaluation, Dinking instead chose to go, what is AWOL? Away
absent
from
without leave.
Okay. Thank you. Before re-emerging on November the 6th, 1963 at the United Nations in Switzerland. Wouldn't that be the most interesting place to go when you have secret information in Europe, Brett?
Here we are.
In the wolf's den. Or what?
Not just the United Nations, but United Nations in Switzerland.
Yeah.
Geneva.
Where he told reporters of his knowledge of the deciphered plot against Kennedy. And now this is the obvious outcome. Dinking was arrested on November the 13th, 1963. After his arrest, he was sent to the Walter Reed Army Medical Center, but not before being first held as a psychiatric hospital. Yeah, people, you get, if you tell the truth, you will be labeled as a lunatic. The assassination still took place, and Dinking's attempt to thwart it was ushered down the memory hole, not even earning a mention in the Warren Report. You can research more about Dinking and his attempt to warn of Kennedy's demise here, including Dinking's other sobering revelations. The saga of an unsung hero. And they locked him away in a psychiatric hospital. And there are many things, and you really cannot throw everything in your direction, you see. But you know the name now. This is Eugene Dinking. Even Jim Garrison, investigators talked to the DA that while he was hospitalized, Dinking was made to recite a cover story. This may be because when Garrison dug deeper into Dinking, he discovered that one of his functions as a codebreaker was to decipher messages from the French OAS, coming from Dick Russell, the man who knew too much, 2nd edition, page 352. The Dinking dossier. In March 1962, Army's private first class Eugene B. Dinking was assigned to the Ordnance Company in France as a crypto operator who avoided the requisite security clearances, according to Lieutenant Colonel John C. Lippincott of the Pentagon's Legislative Liaison Office. A crypto clearance is among the highest that the military gives, making Dinking in effect part of the National Security Agency, NSA, the CIA's top secret communications counterpart. Until 1976, when portions of some documents on Dinking were finally released, everything supplied to the Warren Commission about him was withheld from the public. But an FBI report of April 3, 1964, recounted Dinking's projection several weeks before the assassination that a conspiracy was in the making by the military of the United States, perhaps combined with an ultra-right economic group. How can that be? According to since declassified CIA files, Dinking's warning was known to a number of people before November the 22nd. It began on October the 22nd, 1963, when Dinking writes that he made a letter to Attorney General Robert Kennedy. Dinking said, "I did offer in this letter a warning that an attempt to assassinate President Kennedy would occur on November the 28th of 1963, that if it were to succeed, blame would then be placed upon a communist or Negro who would be designated the assassin, and believing the conspiracy was being engineered by elements of the military, I did speculate that the military coup might ensue. I did request at the Attorney General that be dispatch a representative of the Justice Department to Metz, France, to discuss this warning." Dinking realized, he continued, that his letter to Robert Kennedy had an extremely minimal probability of coming into the direct attention of the Attorney General. So Dinking suddenly left his unit. On October the 25th, he set out to try and contact certain European ambassadors. You know that ambassadors are Secret Service agents like Joe P. Kennedy. In the nearby nation of Luxembourg, in hopes that his message would then filter through their intelligence networks, what did I say, to the United States. Nobody gave the time of day except the Israeli ambassador to Luxembourg, who, Dinking writes, advised him how best to present his case at the American embassy here. Dinking says, "At the United States Embassy, I was interviewed by Charge d'Affaires, Mr. Cunningham, who told me that the ambassador was playing tennis and was therefore unavailable. I did relate to Mr. Cunningham that I had information indicative of a political assassination to occur in late November in the United States, and he did then guarantee to convey this message to Ambassador Rifkin, who would notify me at the military base of an appointment." A week passed and no such notice came. Then Dinking explains, "I did, however, learn through the military grapevine that I was to be locked up as a psychotic. I did on November the 2nd, 1963, obtain a signed and officially stamped leave permit from the commanding officer of Metz, General Depot, and when summoned back to the CO's office to be told that the leave was cancelled, having concealed the signed form, I did then tear up a blank form. That evening I left Metz, France, by train and used the signed leave permit to gain entry to Switzerland on the morning of November the 3rd. Then Private Dinking went away without official leave, and his quest grew stranger still. On November the 6th, he showed up at the UN press office in Geneva, where, failing to find the American correspondent he was seeking, he told his tale to the owner-editor of the Geneva Diplomat. The CIA verified this in a document prepared for the Warren Commission by Richard Helms on the May 19, 1964, and released in 1976 with Dinking's name deleted. Immediately after the assassination, the CIA reported allegations concerning a plot to assassinate President Kennedy that were made by PFC U.S. Army, so the name deleted, serial number deleted, on 6th and 7th November 1963 in Geneva, while absent without leave from his unit in Metz, France. In other words, someone with the CIA was aware, at least immediately after the assassination, that Dinking had made such allegations 2 weeks prior. So, these are the sources. So, of course, there are several people who have foreknowledge. David Frederick Christensen, for example, also code operator for US military in 1963. Yeah, he was ignored and his sanity called into question. That's the same when you speak the truth. Yeah, they say you're insane. Of course, we're living in an antichrist, in a satanic world, in the world of the devil, and the devil calls the truth insanity. Of course, it's the opposition of his so-called truth, which is the lie. Yeah, there are so many people actually who are, when you really research that, who could also have transferred their knowledge. And you have to really think that in the case of Eugene Dinking, for example, he was a military code breaker. Yeah. So, of course, his assumption that the military was being in charge or at least connected to the assassination of John F. Kennedy is, of course, quite logic. It's quite logic. There are so many people, I don't know where to start. There are so many people. I don't want to extend the session, you see, that I just want to point out that there are many, many people. And the two people I mentioned coming from the military, they have been called insane. And they've even been locked away, even after the assassination in reality took place. So they want to avoid to spread the truth at any cost. If, of course, that story with Eugene Dinking, etc., is correct. But of course, if there's so many people are involved with the assassination, someone will talk or someone will be interfered or somebody will lose a piece of paper or something like this. You see that you can't hide it from anybody, from all the people. I just want to point out that nothing happens by accident, and the assassination of a president of the United States does not happen by accident. It has to be carefully planned, because if it would have failed, then all hell would have broken loose. That's the key thing. You have to be aware that it will really succeed. Yeah, so that otherwise there would be so many things. Yeah. That just I want to present you. It is just when you go in all the details, when you go all in the things that have been presented as truth. I don't know if there is anything which is an agent here presented to us as a so-called whistleblower or so. But the thing is that in the case of Eugene Dinking, when somebody is officially been locked away, then you see that there are people in the diplomatic area and the intelligence community. There's something to hide. There's something to hide. If the presidency of the United States is being decided by bullets fired from rifles, then rather than ballots cast by citizens, we have indeed been taken over by a whole new form of government. It's a quote of Professor James Feather in reference to JFK's assassination. And you don't have to be a professor to come to that conclusion, Brett.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Yeah. Yeah. And of course, coming back to a more earlier session, it was the alleged mistress. You see, there you have to believe her that she was the alleged mistress, and you have to believe her testimony as well. When she says, so-called Madeleine Duncan, she says that Johnson emerged from a closed-door meeting in one of the rooms in the house one day before the assassination was taking place in the Texas home of the altar Clint Murchison, also including J. Edgar Hoover, who was, of course, the man in charge for all the evidence after the assassination. Lyndon Johnson allegedly told Madeleine Brown, quote, "Those PPP Kennedys will never embarrass me again. That's no threat, that's a promise." My conclusion would be that there is a time for everything. And as we do not believe in coincidences, as Christians, we know that God has planned everything before. So we have to assume as Christians that it was the task of John F. Kennedy to be president and to leave a statement in this world that all men who want to get on the powers to be will be pursued, will be fighted against, and in the long run will be assassinated or executed. I think that in the terms of JFK, executed is the more suitable word. So there is a time to be born and there's a time to die. And it seems that on November the 22nd, 1963, it was JFK's time to die. So that it is very sad that it is so, but there is, according to the Bible, almost no other possibility, because God is always in charge. If it was supposed to happen, it would have happened, and it happened. And so all the people who had foreknowledge or premonition or what else in that regard, they, of course, they will say that, oh, if I would be heard, then I could have been avoided. But in the end, nothing could have been avoided, because it was supposed to happen. It was supposed to happen according to Ecclesiastes chapter 3, which I would like to have my brother Brett to be read this time. And that's also the end of this session. And then in the next session, we will go into the real backgrounds of the assassination and, of course, of the history of the United States also. So thank you very much for having me. God bless until next time. And now handing it over to my beloved brother Brett.
Thank you, Michael. Yes, Ecclesiastes chapter 3 reads, "To everything there is a season, and to every purpose under the heaven. A time to be born and a time to die. A time to plant and a time to pluck up that which is planted. A time to kill and a time to heal. A time to break down and a time to build up. A time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to cast away stones and a time to gather stones together, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to get and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to cast away, and a time to rend and a time to sow, a time to keep silence and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time of war and a time of peace. And what profit hath he that worketh in that wherein he laboreth? I have seen the travail which God hath given to the sons of men to be exercised in it. He hath made everything beautiful in his time. Also he hath set the world in their heart, so that no man can find out the work that God maketh from the beginning to the end. I know that there is no good in them, but for a man to rejoice and to do good in his life, and also that every man should eat and drink and enjoy the good of all his labor. It is the gift of God. I know that whatsoever God doeth, it shall be forever. Nothing can be put to it, nor anything taken from it. And God doeth it, that men should fear before him. That which has been now, or that which is now, verse 15, that which hath been is now, and that which is to be hath already been. And God requireth that which is past. And moreover, I saw under the sun the place of judgment, that wickedness was there, and the place of righteousness, that iniquity was there. I said in mine heart concerning the estate, is that 17?
Said in mine heart, God shall judge. I can edit it out, of course.
Okay. And I said in mine heart, God shall judge the righteous and the wicked, for there is a time there for everyone, or every purpose, and for every work. I said in mine heart concerning the estate of the Son of Men, that God might manifest them, and that they might see that they themselves are beasts. For that which befalleth the sons of men befalleth beasts. Every one thing befalleth them. as the one dieth, so the other. Yea, they have all done one breath, so that a man hath no preeminence above a beast, for all is vanity. All go unto one place, all are of the dust, and all turn to dust again. Who knoweth the spirit of man that knoweth, who knoweth the spirit of man that goeth upward, and the spirit of the beast that goeth downward to the earth? Wherefore I perceive that there is nothing better than that a man should rejoice in his own works, for that is his portion. For who shall bring him to see what shall be after him?
Yeah, thank you, Brett. And it's my conviction that there are no accidents and that it could have not been prevented. And as it was sort of the title of a biography of Kennedy's mother, I wanted to do that session to point that out. That was, for me, that was the task of Kennedy to be assassinated, so that we can learn from that example that the Bible is correct when the Bible states that it is the woman who sitteth among many waters with their false doctrine, the whore, which sitteth among many waters. That is absolutely, this is in power, and this is the Roman Church. And that's what Kennedy got killed. Of course, he got killed by a bullet. But you have to see that the plan behind. Everybody looks for the killer, but actually we have to look for the cause. And that's what we are going to deal with in the upcoming sessions, where we will look behind the curtain. I hope so, that we will look behind the curtain and to do it in a quite a different way than the usual researchers will do, who also and always and only will look for the killer. But we will look for evidence that religious things and religious items are being connected to the death and the assassination of John F. Kennedy. And I think that is much more interesting than to go into the question, who did it or who done it? Although we will go also into that question, and we will exclude then many people, the usual suspects, and then what has been left. And then you will see that it has been carefully planned. And there are many, many reasons why even almost 60 years after that assassination took place, even then people do not have a clue, are being tossed around on purpose. Because if the assassination of Kennedy was no accident, it had been planned before. And then also the cover-up has been planned beforehand. And so that we will go into, next time we will go into the background of the things, starting with also the American history. Thank you very much for having me. And thank you very much, Brett. And please close the session down.
Thank you, Michael. Yes, I was thinking about what you just said, about, more or less being blinded by the different things going on. And, the Bible actually speaks about this in the New Covenant, the New Testament. And, we really should be responsible in the sense that we should study, Michael. We don't need to be professors, but we do need to study. And maybe we should consider ourselves professed of the Word of God,
Mm-hmm.
and, as the Scripture tells us, that we should study to prove ourselves, or study to show ourselves approved. And, I think of 2 Corinthians here, in whom the God of this world hath blinded the minds of them which believe not, lest the light of the glorious gospel of Christ, who is the image of God, should shine unto them. Yeah, that's 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 4.
Mm-hmm.
And it continues, for we preach not ourselves, but Christ Jesus the Lord, and ourselves your servants for Jesus' sake. For God, who commanded the light to shine out of darkness, has shined in our hearts to give the light of the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Jesus Christ. But we have this treasure in the earthen vessels. Yeah, it goes on, there's so much more to this, Michael. And, certainly the Bible will cast that light for us. We just have to turn to it. We have to know when, and obviously, if you follow Exodus 20, as the Sabbath comes to mind, how come our leaders in the church insist on a Sunday Sabbath? When it clearly says, remember the seventh day to keep it holy. It clearly says it. But, and of course, in Europe, the seventh day is Sunday, but that doesn't necessarily ring true when you know your history, Michael, and you know that changes were made, and that that we've been deceived. There's a lot more to consider, and certainly we can't cover that all in a nutshell like some of our listeners would like, but we would rather encourage you to do your own research and to study these things out on your own, and maybe you'll find in the end the same conclusion that Michael and I have come to. There is no stopping the conspiracy of the assassination of President Kennedy. I fully, wholeheartedly agree with Michael's conclusion. There was no way, even when you have an inside knowledge of that intelligence, when you try and make those aware in the intelligence community, of course they're going to shun you. Of course they're going to shut you up. Of course they're going to treat you like dirt and call you psychotic because you're interfering with their plans. They don't want this public. Are you kidding me? This is private information that they guard with their lives. If they're going to assassinate you, you're going to just have to pay. And that's the beast for you. Remember, it's a tyrannical government. Yeah, I think we have tyranny today, Michael. Some may disagree, but sorry, the truth hurts. And we're just going to have to suffer through it, Michael. We're not going to have a place of glory here on this earth. That's reserved for our Redeemer, not for us. So with that, we'll close the session. Thank you, Michael. Thank you for the research. Look forward to seeing everyone next time. Maranatha.